Hey folks, and welcome back. I'm Daniel, and this is Hydra Hobbies. Now today we're going to be doing another quick craft video, which is a little unusual. Normally I like to mix it up a bit, throw in a painting tutorial or a product review. But what we're making today is something I actually need for my own home game. So I thought I might as well make it with you folks, and maybe you'll have a use for it too. What I'm going to be doing is making a fire pit, the kind of fire pit that you might like roast a pig over, that you might find in the middle of a Viking longhouse, for instance, which is certainly where I'm going to have it. But this would also be at home, say on a large farming property or in the court of a medieval keep. It could even be perfectly at home in a Roman villa. So no matter where your game takes place, you can probably find a use for this. Alright, let's get started. So I'm going to start the process with a couple of the thickest square dowel pieces that I own. I'm just going to line these up on the cutting mat. They're about 12 inches long. So I just want to mark the first one at the 6-inch mark. And I'm going to cut that in half. So because these are fairly thick wooden pieces, I'm going to use a miter box and just a little saw to cut it, rather than using my hobby knife. But if all you have is the hobby knife, I'm 100% sure it will work, just be careful. So that gives me two pieces of roughly equal length. And what I'm going to do is just use the same miter box to put a 45-degree angle on both ends of both pieces. So that gives me this. And now I just need to decide how long I want the fire pit to be. I'm thinking 3 inches across. I want this to be fairly large. Like I said, something you might find in the middle of a longhouse. So it's got to be a little bit grand. So I'm just going to mark this at 3 inches and at 6 inches. And I'm going to follow the same process. I'm going to cut these pieces and then use the miter box to put a 45-degree angle on both ends. Now, as you can see, I'm just assembling the frame of the fire pit with tacky glue. As simple as putting the corners of these four pieces together. And they should fit relatively well because they're all 45-degree angles. There. Perfect. I'm just going to let that dry. Now it is time to make the base or backing for the fire pit. And I'm just going to use this bit of cardstock that is the back of a frozen pizza. So while you judge my tragic culinary choices, I'm just going to put some tacky glue down on our frame. And then I'm going to turn it around and stick it to the cardstock. Now you could of course cut the cardstock ahead of time because we know that this is 6 inches by 3 inches, but the exact cuts are probably a little off. The measurements were certainly not perfect. They were very rough, and so instead, I'm going to stick this down to the backing, wait for it to fully dry, and then trim around it. Now with the glue dry, it is time to trim this up. Now if you wanted to, you could leave some extra space around this, sort of as like a patch of dirt to decorate. If you wanted like soil or flowers or to have something propped against the fire pit, you could do that. I want something that's capable of going inside or outside or in a bunch of different environments. So I'm not going to do that, but now would be the time to leave that extra space if you were inclined to do so. With the excess trimmed off, I'm left with this. And what I want to do is, I want this fire pit to look well used, but I also don't want it to look like it is actively being used. It's a cold fire pit at this point. So I'm going to put a little bit of white PVA glue in here because I don't need this to dry particularly fast. And I'm just going to get an old brush wet and just push the glue just into all the corners here. Okay, and with that thoroughly coated, I am making my first layer of texture out of just this really fine sand. And I'm just going to sprinkle that all over. Alright, my glue is dried, and I'm actually going to do this a little bit out of my usual order, and I'm going to paint the wood now, because the paint for the wood is just going to be an oil wash, like a red-brown oil wash, just like that. And I want to do a little bit of foam brickwork on this, but the white spirits in the oil wash might eat the foam. So I'm gonna just paint the wood first and get that out of the way. And then we'll move on to doing the foam brickwork when it's done. Alright, the oil wash has soaked into the wood, so the next step is going to be that stone lining. So I'm just taking some foam bricks, dipping them in tacky glue, and I'm just going to put them along the edges of the fireplace, because I don't think a fireplace made out of wood is a great idea. But I do want that kind of decorative looking element on the outside, so I'm just going to line it with bricks. And that way I get the best of both worlds. And that leaves us right here with a nice stone brick lining on our wooden fireplace. Now the next thing is that I want some kind of ashes and coals and bits of charred wood all throughout this kind of center of the fireplace where it's been heavily used. That's what's really going to sell it and help to make it more convincing. So let's get started on that. So for those larger pieces of ash and charred wood, I'm going to be using this, which is just some cheap dollar store gravel. And that is why I'm using this one specifically, is because this was from the dollar store. It was $2 for that whole jar, and I want to keep this as inexpensive and accessible as possible. So I'm going to put some glue down, and I want to keep it like relatively close to the middle of the pit. I don't want this too far to the outsides. I think the bulk of the fire is of course going to be in the center. So I'm going to spread some glue around there, and then we're going to put some gravel down. And for my last little bits of texture, what I've actually done is just gone outside and grabbed a couple little twigs. I cooked them in my oven at 400 degrees for about 20 minutes, and I'm just going to glue those down as if they're bits of leftover wood in the fire pit. Now the reason you want to cook them is because you don't want to be bringing any bugs or anything that's going to mold and ruin your project into your house. So you just want to make sure that they're nice and clean and don't have any of that stuff in them before you glue them down. I don't want to use too much of this. I probably gathered way too many, but it's a nice easy way to add a little bit of extra texture. Now this is all going to be painted up to be blacks and grays by the time it's done, so I'm not too worried about these standing out for color or anything like that. I just think having a little bit of different texture and something that actually reads as wood is going to help sell this as a fire pit. Now with all the glue dry, it is time to paint, and I'm just starting by painting the bricks gray very carefully since they're up against that wood, which I'm already finished with. You'll also notice that I am not priming this. Now that's because what primer does is take a smooth surface like the plastic of a miniature where paint doesn't have anything to really grip to, and it gives it a little bit more tooth, a little bit more grit, so that the paint can bind to it more easily. Well, this is not a terribly smooth surface, so I'm not too worried about it. I think I can do this without priming it. Likewise, with all of the glue on here, I don't really need the extra binding agent that the primer that something like Mod Podge would give. I think it'll be just fine, just like this. Now I am using miniature paints for this, but honestly craft paints are probably the better choice, or at least a perfectly valid choice for it. There's no real reason to use miniature paints except that I have some old miniature paints that I'm trying to kind of get off of my shelves because they're just taking up too much space. So that's what I'm using. Craft paint's also a great choice. And I'm just going to base coat all the bricks gray. Now with the bricks base coated, the next step is going to be a little bit of wet blending. I'm taking this nice dark brown to paint in the dirt around the fire pit, and as I get closer to the coals, I'm just going to blend in a little bit of black to give it that charred look like it's been used for a lot of fires. Now next up is painting the center of the fire pit, all of these dark coals. Now there are a couple of ways to do this, but you're going to want something that runs between all of this grit and dirt so that you get great coverage in between the rocks. Otherwise, you're going to have that brown color showing through. Now, one way to do that would be to take your black paint and thin it down with water and add multiple thin coats. That would be great if you're a patient painter. The reason I'm not doing it that way, well, the two reasons I'm not doing it that way. One is that I am not a patient painter, not unless I have to be. The other reason is that much liquid could actually reactivate the glue that is holding all of this together, and that could become a major problem. So instead, I've taken that black paint and I thinned it down with black ink. That way I'm only going to have to do one coat of paint, hopefully, over the entire fire pit. So the next step, once everything is dry, is going to be some dry brushing. And I'm just taking a medium gray, and I'm going to brush it over all of the grit and coals in the middle. Now I do want to extend this one out a little bit into the dirt as well, but I don't want to go right up to the edges. That said, I do want to try and catch the bricks too, but you want to be careful doing that because the bricks are right up against that woodwork, and I don't want any gray on there. So I'm just going to carefully go through the entire coal pit, and then I'll hit the bricks, at least trying to catch. Really what I want with the bricks is just catching these sort of outer edges here, like this. And I'll get the dirt a little bit too. So here's how that looks with the first dry brush done. For the next step, I'm taking a much lighter gray, coming in for a much finer dry brush just over the coals on this one. With the last dry brush done, we're almost wrapped up here, but I do think that the bricks are looking a little flat. So I'm gonna give them a wash, and I'm just doing that with my old school homemade black wash. This is just black paint and ink, water, and a bit of dish soap. And I'm just doing it across the bricks. I'm going to skip everywhere else because I don't want to reactivate that glue, and I like the dusty, dry look that it has right now. So it's just the bricks getting this. While I do that, I want to say thank you for watching. If you're enjoying this, please hit like. If you want to see more, hit subscribe. And I appreciate everyone who has watched this far, and everyone who left comments on the last video about enjoying the quick craft videos, because that really helps me decide what to do and what videos to make next. And honestly, crafting scatter is one of my favorite things to do. It's something I could pretty much do all day, and I just think it adds so much to a table. So, thank you all for letting me know that you enjoyed that. Likewise, if you want to support the channel further, there is a Patreon link below. There is no exclusive content on the Patreon, nothing paywalled ever, but I do post some miniature painting and things like that there. Things that I don't do for the channel, but just on my own time. And it's a place where we can chat about projects or about upcoming videos. So if you're interested, go ahead and check that out. Now with the wash dried, it is time to move on to the last step, and that is this black pigment powder. Color-wise, this project is kind of, blacks on grays and blacks on grays and blacks on grays. And that can look a little boring maybe, but it is a fire pit for one, and for another, it's actually all of these different textures and types of blacks, and the different levels of reflectivity on them that give it the look that it's going to have of a well-worn fire pit. Like this pigment powder is perfectly matte and dusty, and that looks like old ash, but the wash is a little more reflective, and the ink that was on the coals, again, a little more reflective than that. And so it's these layers that give it a nice, worn, used, realistic look. And I'm just kind of dotting the pigment powder on at random. It's fine if it gets on the bricks, it's fine if it gets on the wood. Anywhere that ash might be, you can put this pigment powder, and it's gonna look great. I'm even putting some on the coals in splotches in different places to make different places look more worn than others. So here is the finished piece. And final thoughts on this? I actually kind of love it. I think it looks great. It really sells the fire pit effect that I was going for. And once again, it's the pigment powder right at the end that adds so much to that effect and just really brings it out. Even the smudges of it on the wooden border, again, just ground everything and make it so much more realistic looking. If you don't have pigment powders and you're looking to get some better weathering effects, I would 100% recommend them. They are a fantastic way to go. Just grab like a black and a brown and you're pretty much set. And they come in such nice quantities for relatively cheap that you're really only gonna have to buy them once, chances are. But yeah, I'm very happy with this. It didn't take much time at all. It didn't take much in the way of materials, and I am absolutely sure that this is gonna end up on a lot of tables. Would 100% recommend making one of these yourself if you love scatter terrain as much as I do. Alright folks, thank you for watching. I hope to see you on the next one.